Linda Morrison signed away her entire life in 14 minutes, sitting at her own kitchen table, grief still thick as fog, while her son handed her papers faster than she could read them. She was 72 years old. Her husband, Tom, had been dead exactly 11 days, and she had no idea she'd just become homeless. The kitchen still smelled like Tom's coffee. His reading glasses sat on the counter where he'd left them that Tuesday morning before the heart attack stole him mid-sentence. Linda couldn't look at them without her throat closing, so when Marcus arrived with Ashley and those manila folders, she'd been grateful for the distraction, grateful someone was handling things, grateful she didn't have to think. "Mom, you can't stay here alone," Marcus had said, his voice heavy with concern that sounded so genuine. The stairs, the yard work, all these memories crushing you every single day. Ashley squeezed her hand. "We found the perfect place, Serenity Gardens. It's like a resort, Linda. Pool, activities, people your age. You deserve to enjoy your golden years instead of rattling around this big empty house." The house wasn't empty. It was full of 43 years with Tom, full of Marcus's childhood artwork still in boxes in the basement, full of Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings and ordinary Wednesdays that meant everything. But Marcus kept talking about square footage and property taxes and how the real estate market was peaking, how selling now meant financial security, how Serenity Gardens had a waiting list, but Ashley knew someone who could get her in. "We'll handle everything," Marcus promised. "You just focus on healing." So Linda signed, page after page. Her hand shook, but Marcus guided it, flipping papers, pointing to signature lines, explaining in that soothing financial advisor voice he used with clients that this was all standard estate planning, protection, smart preparation. She trusted him. He was her son. Why wouldn't she trust him? The house sold in 8 days for $800,000. Marcus said the speed was lucky, miraculous even. He drove her past strip malls and gas stations to a building that looked nothing like the glossy brochure. Paint peeling, parking lot cracked, the sign out front said Meadowbrook Care Facility in letters that had lost their glow. "I thought we were going to Serenity Gardens," Linda said, confusion spreading cold through her chest. "This is temporary," Marcus explained, not meeting his eyes. "Serenity had a waiting list. This is just until a spot opens. 2 weeks, maybe 3. The room they showed her was 12 by 14 feet. Beige walls, beige floor, a single window overlooking a dumpster. The mattress sagged in the middle like something defeated. This was temporary, Linda told herself. Marcus said so. She unpacked her 2 suitcases. Somehow 43 years of marriage had been reduced to 2 suitcases, and waited. 2 weeks became 3. 3 became 4. Marcus stopped answering her calls. When she finally reached him, his voice was clipped, distracted. "I'm managing your investments, Mom. The house money is working for you. Trust me, I do this for a living." But something felt wrong like a smoke alarm in the distance, wrong like forgetting to turn off the stove. Linda couldn't name it, but she felt it, a wrongness that followed her through the beige hallways and sat beside her in the musty dining room where the meatloaf tasted like regret. At night, lying on that defeated mattress, Linda wondered if grief had broken something in her mind. Maybe she was confused. Maybe Marcus was right, and all this was standard procedure. Maybe she was just a foolish old woman who didn't understand modern finance. But Tom's voice whispered in the darkness, "Linda, you're the smartest person I ever knew. Trust yourself." The nurse who changed everything was named Carmen. 40-something, tired eyes, but kind, real kind, not the performance kind. She found Linda crying in the activity room one afternoon, staring at a bank statement that made no sense. "Mrs. Morrison, you okay, honey?" Linda looked up, vision blurred. "I don't understand these numbers. My son said my house money was being invested, but this shows my accounts are empty." Carmen's expression shifted. That professional smoothness cracked into something sharp and aware. "Can I see that?" She studied the statement, her jaw tightened. "Mrs. Morrison, when did you move in here?" 6 weeks ago. It's temporary until Serenity Gardens has an opening." "There is no Serenity Gardens in this county," Carmen said quietly. "I've worked elder care for 20 years. I know every facility within 50 miles. The room tilted. Linda gripped the armrest of her chair. Carmen sat down beside her. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm going to say something, and I need you to hear me. What you're describing, it's called financial elder abuse, and it happens more than you think, usually by family members." "No, Marcus wouldn't." "Let me help you check something. Do you know your online banking password?" Linda didn't. Tom had always handled that, but she knew her social security number, her mother's maiden name, the security questions. Carmen helped her reset access on the computer in the resident lounge, and what they found made Linda's stomach turn to ice. Every account, checking, savings, the money market Tom had been so proud of, showed the same thing: zero balance. But the transaction history told a story. Large transfers, all to Marcus Lawrence Morrison, all authorized by power of attorney. Power of attorney, those papers she had signed, the ones Marcus had flipped through so quickly. "Mrs. Morrison," Carmen said gently, "those documents you signed, did anyone explain what they actually were?" Linda couldn't breathe. The room was too hot, too small, too real. "There's more," Carmen said, scrolling. "Look at this recent transaction. Your son purchased property in Aspen, Colorado. Purchase price, $750,000. Her house money, Tom's careful savings, the nest egg they'd built over decades of him teaching high school history and her working part-time at the library. Marcus had taken it all and bought himself a vacation home in the mountains, while his mother lived in a room overlooking a dumpster. Linda Morrison had been married to Tom for 43 years. She'd raised Marcus mostly alone, while Tom worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. She'd sacrificed her dream of finishing college to support them. She'd been patient when Marcus struggled in school, fierce when he was bullied, proud when he finally found success as a financial advisor. She'd given him everything, and he'd repay her by stealing her home, her money, and her dignity. But what Linda didn't know, what Marcus didn't know, was that Tom Morrison had been paying attention. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, 6 weeks after Marcus had deposited his mother in Meadowbrook like unwanted furniture. It came from Bancroft Insurance Company, addressed to Linda Morrison, marked Urgent Beneficiary Notification. Carmen helped her open it. Linda's hands were shaking too hard to manage the envelope. "Dear Mrs. Morrison, we are writing to inform you that the life insurance policy held by your late husband, Thomas Edward Morrison, policy number 847LM9384, has completed its required waiting period and is now eligible for payout. Per the beneficiary designation updated on November 3rd of last year, you are the sole recipient of this death benefit in the amount of $2.5 million. Linda read it 3 times. Carmen read it twice. They sat in stunned silence in that beige activity room while somewhere a TV played The Price is Right and someone's phone rang unanswered. "Tom had life insurance?" Linda whispered. "He never told me." "It says he updated it 6 months before he died," Carmen pointed out. "Changed the beneficiary to you alone." You alone. Not Marcus, just Linda. Tom had known. Somehow, before that heart attack stole him on an ordinary Tuesday morning, Tom had seen something in Marcus that made him protect his wife. He'd quietly removed their son from the policy and made sure Linda would be taken care of, even if Marcus tried exactly what he tried. "Mrs. Morrison," Carmen said carefully, "you need a lawyer, A good one, because what your son did, transferring your assets, forging your signature on documents you didn't understand, abandoning you in a facility you can't afford, that's not just wrong, it's criminal. Linda thought about Marcus, about the little boy who'd cried when his goldfish died, about the teenager who'd struggled with math until Tom spent every evening at the kitchen table teaching him patience, about the man who'd grown successful and confident and somewhere along the way had started measuring his worth in dollar signs instead of character, about the man who'd looked his grieving mother in the eye and lied, who'd taken her home, who'd stopped calling. She thought about Tom's voice in the darkness. Trust yourself. Call the lawyer, Linda said. Call them now. The attorney's name was Rebecca Feldman, sharp-eyed and 60, with a reputation for destroying elder abusers in court. She sat in Meadowbrook's conference room reviewing Linda's documents with the focused intensity of a surgeon studying an X-ray. This is textbook fraud, Rebecca said finally. Power of attorney abuse, financial exploitation, potentially forgery on several of these signatures. Your son is looking at serious criminal charges if we pursue this fully. If? Linda asked. Mrs. Morrison, my job is to get you justice, but justice looks different to different people. Some of my clients want maximum punishment, prison time, asset forfeiture, public humiliation. Others want their money back and their dignity restored. What do you want? Linda looked out the window at the parking lot, the dumpster, the beige everything. She thought about Marcus in handcuffs, about Ashley filing for divorce, about her grandchildren, sweet Emma and Josh, 14 and 16, watching their father destroyed. She thought about revenge, how it might taste, how satisfying it might feel to watch Marcus lose everything like she'd lost everything. But then she thought about Tom, about his patience, about how he'd spent 20 years teaching teenagers who'd failed history 3 times that people could learn, could grow, could become better than they'd been. I want my money back, Linda said slowly. I want him to face consequences, but I also want to understand if there's a version of justice that doesn't just destroy, but maybe transforms. Rebecca studied her. That's a rare answer. My husband spent his life believing people could change. I'm not ready to give up that belief just because it's harder. Within 48 hours, Rebecca had frozen all of Marcus's assets, the Aspen property, his bank accounts, his investment portfolios, everything locked down pending investigation. Marcus called Linda for the first time in 6 weeks. Mom, what the hell is happening? My accounts are frozen. There are investigators calling. Did you hire a lawyer? Linda's voice was steady, steadier than she'd expected. Yes, Marcus, I hired a lawyer because you stole from me. You lied to me. You abandoned me in a facility I can't afford while you bought a ski chalet with my money. Silence. Then, I was managing your assets. I was protecting you from making poor financial decisions. You don't understand how complicated. I understand that you committed fraud, Marcus, multiple felonies, and that you did it while I was grieving your father. His voice changed, got harder. You're going to regret this. I have lawyers too, good ones. This is going to destroy our family. You destroyed our family when you chose money over your mother. Linda hung up. Her hands were shaking, but her heart was calm, clear. For the first time in 8 weeks, she felt like herself. The life insurance money arrived in 3 business days. $2.5 million deposited into an account Rebecca had set up, untouchable by Marcus, protected by legal barriers he couldn't manipulate. Linda Morrison went from homeless widow to millionaire in 72 hours. But the money didn't solve the ache. It didn't fill the space where her son used to be. It didn't answer the question that kept her awake at night. How do you love someone who's betrayed you so completely? The answer appeared on a Thursday afternoon in the form of two teenagers standing in Meadowbrook's lobby, both crying. Emma and Josh, Linda's grandchildren. She hadn't seen them since Tom's funeral. Marcus and Ashley had kept them away, had stopped returning her calls, had erased her from their lives like she was already dead. Now they stood there, Emma's mascara running, Josh's face red and angry, both of them looking lost. "Grandma," Emma whispered, "we didn't know. Dad said you were traveling. He said you needed space to grieve. He never told us." Her voice broke. Josh spoke through clenched teeth. "Our school counselor showed us a news article about Dad being investigated for elder abuse. They're talking about it at school. Everyone's talking about it. And when we asked Dad, he said you were lying, that you were confused, that grief made you paranoid. But Mom told us the truth." Emma continued. "She was crying. She said Dad stole from you, that everything we have, the new house, the cars, everything, it's all your money. She said she didn't know. She's filing for divorce." They were fracturing in real time. These kids, their family imploding, their father revealed as a thief, their world crumbling into something unrecognizable. Linda's first instinct was to comfort them. But Carmen had warned her, kids who've been lied to need truth, not more soft words. So Linda told them everything: the house, the fake facility, the forged documents, the stolen money, the weeks of abandonment. She didn't spare details, but she didn't dramatize either. Just truth, plain and hard. When she finished, Josh was crying. Emma looked nauseous. "Why would he do this?" Emma whispered. "Why would Dad hurt you?" This was the question Linda had been asking herself for 8 weeks. And sitting there with her grandchildren, she finally understood the answer Tom would have given. Because somewhere along the way, your father started measuring his worth by the wrong things. Money, success, status, they became more important than character. And when you value things more than people, this is what happens. You become capable of hurting the people you're supposed to protect. "Do you hate him?" Josh asked. Linda considered this. Carefully, honestly. "I hate what he did. I'm devastated by the choices he made. But hate?" She paused. "Hate would mean I'm giving him power over my future, and I'm not willing to do that." "What are you going to do?" Emma asked. "I'm going to make sure he faces consequences, real ones. But I'm also going to do something else, something your grandfather would have wanted. I'm going to build something good from this pain, something that helps people. And maybe, if your father is willing to do the real work, there might be a path back, not to what we had, that's gone, but to something new, something honest." Emma looked at her grandmother with something like awe. "How are you not angrier?" "Oh, I'm angry," Linda said. "I'm furious. But anger is just the surface. Underneath it, I'm heartbroken. And underneath that, I'm determined. Anger burns out. Determination builds." The legal process moved quickly once Marcus realized he had no defense. Rebecca Feldman was ruthless in depositions, methodical in documenting every fraudulent transaction, every forged signature, every instance of exploitation. The district attorney wanted prison time, 5 to 7 years for felony elder abuse, fraud, and identity theft. It would have been easy, satisfying even, justice served cold and absolute. But Linda requested a meeting with the prosecutor, with Marcus's lawyer, with Marcus himself. They sat in a conference room downtown, Marcus in a suit that looked too big now, his confidence deflated into something hollow. He couldn't meet Linda's eyes. "I want restitution," Linda said. "Full restitution. Every dollar returned. The Aspen property sold and proceeds returned to me. Marcus loses his financial license permanently. He undergoes mandatory counseling, not just court-ordered sessions, but real therapy twice a week for 2 years. The prosecutor nodded. That's all reasonable. We can include it in sentencing. I'm not finished, Linda continued. Instead of prison time, I want Marcus to serve 3 years of intensive community service, 20 hours per week, at elder care facilities, not administrative work, direct care, feeding people, helping them to the bathroom, sitting with the ones who have no visitors. I want him to do the work he thought was beneath him when he abandoned me here. Marcus's lawyer started to object, but Marcus held up a hand. His voice was hoarse. You want me at Meadowbrook? I want you seeing every day what you did to me. I want you meeting other seniors whose children stole from them. I want you to have to look in their eyes and recognize yourself. And maybe, if you're capable of it, I want you to become someone different than the man who stole from his grieving mother. That's not enough punishment enough, the prosecutor argued. He committed serious crimes. He'll lose his career, his marriage, his reputation, 3 years of his life serving the people he victimized. That's not nothing. And if he violates any condition, prison is waiting. But I believe, maybe I'm a fool for this, that transformation is more powerful than destruction. Rebecca leaned over and whispered, Linda, you don't have to offer him grace. I'm not offering grace. I'm offering accountability with the possibility of redemption. There's a difference. The deal was structured exactly as Linda requested. Marcus would make full restitution, $847,000 returned to Linda within 60 days. The Aspen property would be sold immediately. He'd lose his financial advisor license permanently. He'd complete 3 years of supervised community service at elder care facilities. He'd attend therapy twice weekly, and he'd have no contact with Linda unless she initiated it. If he violated any condition, he'd serve 5 years in state prison, no negotiation, no second chances. Marcus signed. His hand shook just like Linda's had 8 weeks ago when she'd signed away her life without knowing it. The symmetry wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Linda took the life insurance money and the recovered house proceeds, $3 million total, and did something Marcus would never have understood. She built something. The Second Chances Senior Advocacy Center opened 4 months later in a renovated house near downtown. 3 stories of warmth and purpose and practical help. The first floor was legal aid, attorneys and paralegals providing free services to seniors facing financial abuse. The second floor was mediation and counseling, family therapy for situations that hadn't crossed into criminal territory, financial literacy classes for seniors, education programs for adult children about the realities of aging parents. The third floor was Linda's favorite. This was the Restorative Justice Program, a space where family members who'd committed financial abuse after legal consequences were served could work towards genuine reconciliation, not forced forgiveness, not performance, real transformation. Because Linda had learned something in those beige weeks at Meadowbrook. She'd learned that while some people were irredeemably cruel, others were just lost, confused, caught in a culture that taught them to value the wrong things. And those people, if they were willing to do the brutal work of change, deserved a path back to humanity. The center served 93 families in its first year. Linda worked there 3 days a week, not as director, but as a volunteer. She sat with seniors who'd been betrayed by their children, held their hands, listened to their stories, helped them understand they weren't foolish or weak. She met with adult children who were terrified of their aging parents' decline and made terrible choices from fear rather than malice. She built bridges where she could, and when bridges weren't possible, she helped people grieve what they lost and build new lives anyway. Marcus started his community service on a Monday morning, Meadowbrook Care Facility, the same building where he'd abandoned his mother. He showed up in jeans and a t-shirt, looking diminished, and met his supervisor, a no-nonsense woman named Denise, who'd worked in elder care for 30 years and had no patience for entitled men. "You're not special here," Denise told him. "You're not a financial advisor. You're not anyone's son. You're just Marcus, and your job is to show up, work hard, and treat our residents with dignity. Can you do that?" Marcus nodded. He couldn't speak. The weight of where he was, what he'd done to end up here, seemed to press on him physically. His first assignment was helping residents to the dining room for breakfast, pushing wheelchairs, steadying walkers, making small talk about the weather and the terrible coffee. A woman named Dorothy grabbed his hand as he helped her sit. "Thank you, young man. My son never visits anymore. It's nice when someone's kind." Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. Over the next few weeks, he learned names, learned stories, learned that Walter had been a Marine, that Patricia had taught elementary school for 40 years, that James had lost his wife 6 months ago and couldn't stop crying during dinner. He learned that the work was hard, physical, emotional, relentless, that some residents were confused, some were angry, some were heartbreakingly grateful for the smallest kindness. And he learned that many of them had children who never visited, children who called once a month if they remembered, children who stole their money, their homes, their dignity, children exactly like Marcus. 3 months into his service, Marcus was helping a man named Robert get ready for bed when Robert started talking about his daughter. "She took everything," Robert said, his voice flat with resignation. "My house, my savings, told me it was for my protection, put me here, and disappeared. I used to think if I'd been a better father, maybe she'd have been different, but I don't know anymore. Maybe some people just value money more than love." Marcus's hands froze on the blanket he was straightening. "I'm sorry that happened to you," he managed. "You got kids?" Robert asked. "2 teenagers. Love them. Show them what matters, because I obviously failed at that somewhere along the way." Marcus finished tucking Robert in, bid him good night, and barely made it to the supply closet before he broke down. Sobbing in the darkness among the extra linens and adult diapers, he finally understood what he'd done. Not in an intellectual way, not in the abstract calculation of legal consequences and lost opportunities, but in his bones, in his soul. He had become Robert's daughter. He had looked at his grieving mother and seen only dollar signs. He had rationalized and justified and convinced himself he was being practical, being smart, protecting family resources. But he'd just been stealing from the woman who gave him everything. Denise found him there 20 minutes later. She didn't say anything, just handed him tissues and waited. "I did this to my mother," Marcus finally said. "Everything I'm seeing here, the abandonment, the theft, the betrayal, I did it to her." "I know," Denise said quietly. "Everyone who works here knows your story. That's why you're here. How do I fix it?" "You can't fix it. You can only become someone different." Marcus worked at Meadowbrook for 18 months before he saw his mother again. She came to the facility for a meeting with administration about the advocacy center partnering with residential facilities. He saw her in the hallway, talking with Denise, laughing about something. She looked different, lighter somehow. Her hair was shorter, styled in a way he'd never seen. She wore colors, a blue sweater he didn't recognize. She looked like herself, but more so, like a version of her mother that had been buried under decades of quiet sacrifice and was finally emerging. She saw him. Their eyes met across the hallway. Marcus froze. Everything in him wanted to run, to hide, to avoid the confrontation his shame couldn't bear. But Linda just nodded. Not warm, not cold, just acknowledgement. Then she returned to her conversation. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, it was just recognition that they existed in the same world. Marcus went back to work, but something had shifted. 6 months later, Linda called him. Her voice on the phone was careful, neutral. "I'd like to meet if you're willing. There's a park near the Advocacy Center, Saturday at 2. Marcus arrived 15 minutes early. Linda was already there, sitting on a bench near the duck pond, feeding breadcrumbs to a family of mallards. He sat down, not too close, leaving space. They watched the ducks for a few minutes in silence. Then Linda spoke. "How's the work at Meadowbrook?" "Hard, honestly, harder than I expected. Not the physical part, the emotional part, seeing what I did reflected in every abandoned senior. Every stolen savings account, every family member who never visits." "Good, that means it's working." Marcus's throat tightened. "Mom, I don't know how to say how sorry I am. I don't have words that cover what I did to you." "No, you don't, because what you did can't be covered with words. I've tried to understand how I became that person, the person who could look at you grieving and see only opportunity. And I think," he stopped, searching, "I think I spent my whole life measuring my worth by success, by money, by achievement. I looked at you and Dad and thought, they worked hard and never got wealthy. I'll be different. But somewhere along the way, being different became being better, and being better became seeing people as assets or liabilities." "You saw me as a liability," Linda said quietly. It wasn't a question. "I saw you as someone who didn't understand money, who would make poor choices, who needed me to manage things." He laughed bitterly. "The arrogance of it. You raised me alone while Dad worked 2 jobs. You sacrificed your education for us. You managed our household on nothing and somehow kept us fed and clothed and loved. But I convinced myself you couldn't handle your own finances." "You convinced yourself of what was convenient to believe." "Yeah, I did." They sat with that truth for a while. A jogger passed. A child fed the ducks with too much enthusiasm. The world continued its ordinary rotation while 2 people tried to find their way through extraordinary damage. "The therapy is helping," Marcus offered, "understanding where the entitlement came from, how I internalized this idea that my success proved my worth, how I justified hurting you because I'd convinced myself I was protecting you." "Are you telling me this because you want forgiveness? Because that's not why I asked you here." "Why did you ask me here?" Linda turned to look at him fully for the first time. Her eyes were clear, not angry, not forgiving, just clear. "Because you're working at Meadowbrook, because Denise tells me you show up every day and do the work without complaint, because the residents like you, because you broke down in the supply closet when Robert told you about his daughter." She paused. "Because I need to know if you're performing transformation or actually experiencing it." "How do I prove that?" "You can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Some things can't be proven, only demonstrated over time. But what I can tell you is this. Forgiveness isn't about what you deserve, Marcus. It's about what I need to be free." Marcus felt tears burning. "What do you need?" "I need to know that my son, the one I raised, the one I loved, isn't completely gone. I need to know that if you're going to exist in this world, you're going to exist as someone who protects vulnerable people instead of exploiting them. I need to know that your grandchildren have a chance at learning from your mistakes instead of repeating them." "Emma and Josh hate me." "They don't hate you. They're devastated by you. There's a difference. Hate is clean. Devastation is messy." Marcus wiped his eyes. "What happens now?" "Now you finish your 3 years at Meadowbrook. You continue therapy. You rebuild yourself into someone trustworthy. And maybe we find a way to exist in each other's lives that doesn't require me to pretend the past didn't happen or you to expect automatic forgiveness. Is that possible? Linda looked back at the ducks. I don't know, but I'm willing to find out. Not for you, for me, because I've learned something these past 2 years. Holding on to anger is easier than doing the hard work of healing. Destruction is simpler than construction. But I've spent my whole life building things, a marriage, a home, a son I was proud of. And when you destroyed all of that, I had a choice. I could spend my remaining years making sure he suffered as much as I did, or I could build something new. The Advocacy Center. The Advocacy Center. The families we've helped, the bridges we've rebuilt, the seniors who now have legal protection. That's what I chose to build from the rubble of what you destroyed. She turned back to him. You can't fix the past, Marcus. You can only build a different future. The question is, what are you going to build? 3 years after Linda Morrison signed her life in 14 minutes, she stood in front of 80 people at the Second Chances Senior Advocacy Center's annual conference. The room was full of families at various stages of crisis and healing. Seniors who'd been exploited, adult children who'd made terrible choices, mediators and therapists and lawyers working to create better outcomes. In the back row sat Marcus with Emma and Josh. All 3 were volunteers now. Emma ran the center's social media, sharing stories of transformation and hope. Josh worked the front desk, greeting terrified seniors with the kind of gentle patience that couldn't be faked. And Marcus split his time between Meadowbrook and the Advocacy Center, using his financial expertise to teach seniors how to protect themselves from the kind of predator he'd been. They weren't healed, none of them. Healing wasn't an event, it was an ongoing practice. But they were present. They were trying. They were building something honest from the ruins of what had been destroyed. Linda looked out at the crowd and began to speak. 3 years ago, my son stole everything I owned and left me in a nursing facility I couldn't afford. I had every reason to destroy him. I had the resources, the evidence, the moral authority, and for a few weeks I wanted nothing more than to watch him lose everything like I'd lost everything. We live in a culture that tells us justice means equal suffering, that if someone hurts you, healing requires them to hurt just as much. But I've learned something in these 3 years. Revenge and justice aren't the same thing. Revenge is about satisfaction. Justice is about accountability. And real justice, the kind that transforms instead of just punishes, that's about creating space for people to become better than they've been. Marcus was crying quietly in the back row. Emma held one of his hands. Josh held the other. My son faces consequences every day. He lost his career, his marriage, his reputation. He spent 3 years doing the hardest work of his life, caring for the people he'd once dismissed as inconvenient. But more than that, he had to face himself, had to sit with what he'd done and who he'd become, had to choose whether to defend his actions or transform them. Linda's voice strengthened. Some of you are here because you've been betrayed by family. You're wondering how to survive the pain, how to rebuild your life, how to trust anyone again. And some of you are here because you're the ones who did the betraying. You made terrible choices, and you're wondering if redemption is even possible. She looked directly at Marcus. Here's what I want you to know. Healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's not about pretending betrayal didn't devastate you or that your choices didn't destroy people. Healing is about refusing to let the worst thing that happened to you or the worst thing you did be the final word in your story. A woman in the front row was nodding, tears streaming down her face. When my son stole from me, he took my home, my money, my sense of safety. But he couldn't take my choice. I could choose bitterness or building. I could choose revenge or restoration. I could choose to spend my remaining years making sure his cruelty wasn't the end of my story, just the middle. Linda's voice grew softer but more intense. I chose building, and it gave me something revenge never could have given me: purpose, peace, a sense that my life meant more than the worst thing someone did to me. She gestured to the room around them. This center exists because I chose transformation over destruction. The 97 families we helped last year exist because I chose purpose over punishment. And the man sitting in the back row, my son, who still has years of work ahead of him, who may never fully repair what he broke, he has a chance of redemption because I chose to believe that people can become better than they've been. Her voice broke slightly. That doesn't mean what he did was okay. It wasn't. It will never be okay. And it doesn't mean our relationship is fixed. It's not. It may never be what it was. But it means I'm free. Free from the prison of my own anger. Free to build instead of destroy. Free to become someone defined by what I created from my pain instead of what was taken from me. The room erupted in applause, not polite applause, raw, emotional, cathartic applause. After the conference, Linda found Marcus outside, staring at the garden Emma had helped plant. Herbs and flowers and a small fountain that burbled peacefully. "You didn't have to say those things about me," Marcus said quietly. "I didn't say them for you. I said them because they're true." "I still don't understand how you did it, how you chose this instead of revenge." Linda considered this, carefully, honestly. "Because your father spent 43 years showing me that the most powerful thing you can do with pain is refuse to pass it on. He taught teenagers who'd failed over and over that they weren't defined by their worst mistakes. He believed in second chances, in transformation, in the possibility of change. And when he died, I could either honor that belief or abandon it." "He would have been proud of you," Marcus said. Maybe he'd say I'm just finally living up to the example he set for 43 years. She turned to face her son. "But here's what I know. I'm proud of me. Proud that I didn't let what you did turn me into someone bitter and small. Proud that I built something meaningful from something terrible. Proud that I'm teaching my grandchildren that strength isn't about destruction, it's about creation." Marcus nodded, unable to speak. "You have a long road ahead of you," Linda continued. "Years of work, years of proving that your transformation is real, not performance. Years of making amends not just to me, but to everyone you've hurt. And even then, some relationships may never be restored. Some trust may never be rebuilt." "I know. But if you keep showing up, if you keep doing the work, if you keep choosing character over convenience, if you keep caring for vulnerable people instead of exploiting them, then maybe you'll become someone I can choose to know. Not my son the way you were. That person is gone. But someone new, someone honest, someone worth knowing." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever in the traditional sense, but it was something more valuable. It was the possibility of transformation, the space for someone to become better than they've been, the belief that even the worst betrayals didn't have to be the final word. Linda Morrison had learned something in those beige weeks at Meadowbrook, something she carried forward into her new life. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference, and she refused to be indifferent. She cared enough to demand accountability. She cared enough to create consequences. She cared enough to protect other seniors from what she'd experienced. But she also cared enough to leave space for redemption, not because Marcus deserved it, but because she deserved the freedom that came from refusing to let his betrayal define her remaining years. As she walked back into the advocacy center, past the people whose lives had been transformed by her choice to build instead of destroy, Linda felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. She felt whole. Not healed completely, not free from pain, but whole in the way that only comes from living according to your deepest values, even when it would be easier to abandon them. She'd been given a choice in that beige room at Meadowbrook: become someone defined by what was taken from her, or become someone defined by what she chose to build from the ruins. She'd chosen building, and in that choice, she discovered something more powerful than revenge, more satisfying than punishment, more lasting than destruction. She discovered that the best response to betrayal isn't equal suffering. It's radical transformation. Not of the person who hurt you, that's their work to do, but of yourself, of your pain, of your remaining years. Taking what was meant to destroy you and using it to build something beautiful. That's not weakness. That's not surrender. That's not letting someone off the hook. That's power. Real power. The kind that changes the world one choice at a time. The kind that says, you tried to end my story, but I'm writing a different ending. One where healing matters more than winning. One where purpose matters more than punishment. One where the last word isn't about what you took from me, but what I built from the ruins you left behind. Linda Morrison was 75 now. She had a life filled with purpose, surrounded by people who chose her not because they had to, but because she'd earned that choice through character and courage. She'd been betrayed by her son. That would always be true. But it wouldn't be the truest thing about her. The truest thing was this: she took the worst thing that ever happened to her and transformed it into the best thing she ever did. And that was a victory no one could steal.